All right, time for another video story time. Pulled one out of the comments section. This one comes from Aiden, the unluckiest turkey. Is there a type of fish or aspect of fish keeping you'd never touch again? And what fish or part of the hobby do you think you'll always come back to, even if you're taking a break? And why for both of those? So the thing that I don't think I'll ever come back to, and this is probably a little controversial, I don't think I'll ever come back to fancy goldfish. Now, if you've been watching me for the last 10 plus years, you'll know I love fancy goldfish, and I do. I think they're amazing, and we sell them in the store. What I'm not convinced about is that they are well understood yet. And that just means I don't understand them that well. I can keep them alive for kind of a long time, and I can really enjoy them, but especially for my career and my hobby, being that it's on video, right? I don't enjoy doing that in the public eye. So for a while we were selling really high-end goldfish, some were $400, and these, I still remember there was a gunmetal Ryukin that was mind-blowing, and I sold it, and I regret that to this day. But going through the trials and tribulations of a fancy goldfish having a disease or a problem on camera just is too much stress and weight. And so I don't think I'll probably ever I can't say I'll never keep them again. I'm gonna try to never keep them again because I don't think it's a good idea for me, at least while I'm doing it while being watched. And in general, I think I would have to find what I'm gonna call a mentor and a reliable source, a breeder. By the way, if you're hearing that ticking sound, that's from my auto water change system. So, that's part of the low budgetness of this. But if I could find that mentor and the breeder that I thought was breeding to try and improve the health of the, or not even the health, because I do think they're healthy, the ease of care of some of these fancy goldfish, I think I could try it again, potentially. But I think what happens is they're being bred in massive amounts, which all fish are, so no, nothing different there. But I don't think there's enough books and resources and life experiences that I've had to really go and know what I'm looking for when I'm picking out ranchus and arandas and bubble eye and a lion head versus a ranchu versus, yes, there's pedigrees in that, there's definitions like we have for guppies or dogs or something like that. But if we take it back to that dog part of it, where there's different breeders, well, there's genetic defects, and who's trying to breed those out? Who's trying to win the standard at a competition, and who's trying to make this a more adaptable pet? And even though I've had some great success long term, my wife loves goldfish, and we've kept them, we've done them in ponds, we've done them in tanks, and we've done all of this. After X amount of years, I always reach the same fate, and that fate is something has gone wrong. Seemingly we haven't done anything different, and it was thriving, and now it's in this downward spiral where it's getting sick. I cure it, I get it healthy again, and then 4 months later it's getting sick. And you've seen that play out in my 800-gallon aquarium. You've seen that play out in my 100-gallon aquarium back in the day in the studio. And that is just something I don't want to keep reliving. And so until I get a mentor or that breeder or something to change the cycle that I fall into, I'm not going down that road again. And so that's how I can sell it, though. Because just because I haven't cracked the code yet, doesn't mean you won't, or the next customer won't, or the next person won't, or the next YouTuber won't. And in fact, I'm hoping for that. And we saw this fate kind of unfold as well with Jenny of Solid Gold. Now, I think she had some stalker issues and other stuff in the YouTube space and all of that, but in general, keeping fancy goldfish is kind of hard mode aquatics. I consider it to be one of the more difficult things because I haven't mastered it. I do love it as a challenge, though, for that aspect of like, I don't feel like, if you breed something 1,000 times and you're making more of them and you're doing really well with them and you can help others do well with them, you feel like you're getting some mastery, proficient skills there. But in the fancy goldfish world, I've never gotten to that level after many attempts, because I do love them. And I've been to competitions, I've met breeders, I've done all this, but I've still never unlocked it for me personally. Now that being said, I can look at it right off camera there, and I'm keeping Shubunkin goldfish and Sarasacums that aren't here yet, but I do love those fish, and I don't consider them they're a single-tailed fish instead of, kind of the dual tail or fork tail or anything like that. And in general, they have a different body formation, and they typically are pretty much bulletproof. So that's the aspect of the hobby that I probably will never bring back in without a huge revelation. And I think that's a fair statement for anybody to say, I'd never do that again. Well, that statement of never say never, because if all of a sudden my next door neighbor moved in and they were the world's best fancy goldfish breeder, after years and years of hanging out with them, I'm sure I would have them. They'd be like, hey, I have extras. You look at this, look what I do. And they could hold your hand. And that's what I think I need. And I think a lot of people would need, honestly, because we watch a lot of the patterns happen of like, it was going great, had it for 4 years, 7 years, and then, just not doing, I don't think I did anything different really. And it's not the common mistakes where I got 22 goldfish and 11 gallons of water. We're talking 800-gallon tanks, we're talking 100-gallon tanks, we're talking auto water changes, we're talking $100 food, $10 food, we're talking live foods only, we're talking, I've tried a big gamut of like, okay, let's make sure they're getting live Daphne every other day and duckweed on the other days. Let's try only pellet food this time. Let's try only gel foods this time. Let's try winning championship formula this time. Let's try, like with koi food and stuff, I've bought bags of food for the fancy goldfish that are $250 a bag of food. And so trying to disprove or conquer the problems that I've faced in that, like, maybe it's swim bladder disease, or maybe it's this, or maybe it's that, and I just haven't got there. So I think the other question, let me grab a piece of paper. The other question was, or the second part of that question was, what would I come back to even after taking a break? Okay, well that one kind of a lighter story. I get to talk about what I like, and I think for me, after viewing, if I was to look at YouTube videos and stuff like that, which I love, that I can kind of go back in a portal to see my hobby at that time. What was my life like? I can see my old houses, my old fish rooms, but I also know, like when I see that, I also go, oh yeah, I was able to do all that because these were my commitments at work. And there's before Cory owned a store, there's Cory's just starting the store, there's Cory's got a successful store but hasn't gone online or done YouTube yet. Then there's Cory got some money and a budget and production value went up and all of that. So that's kind of a cool thing I can do. And when I think about if I shut all of this down, which, truth be told, that's kind of what's going on right now, is my goal is to get down to 10 aquariums or less, not necessarily the gallons. This will be an 800-gallon aquarium. There's still gonna be a 230-gallon aquarium. So lots of gallons of water, but more select species. What's making the cut, right? And I think what would make the cut down the road. So if I could only, let's say I had to move to a foreign country for some reason, like we're gonna launch Aquariumcoop in Europe and I gotta live there for 2 years to facilitate that. Let's say what would I set up? Because I don't think I could have a period in my life where there's no aquatics. I think there could be a couple of months. It could be like, yeah, okay, and then there's but I miss it. I want to feed, I want to clean, I want to look at this. And for me, what I think that would be is shrimp. In general, cherry shrimp, I think, but Amano shrimp are great too, and other neos. But I love the fact that you can just neglect them. I've neglected them in every way. Leave them outside over winter in a pond with ice on it. Leave them upstairs in a bedroom and don't feed them for 8 months just to test. No, I don't give them light. I put them through all these paces just to learn about these things. And I think part of it is I got really into it early. I didn't discover them. I wasn't the first guy by any means, but early 2000s, I bought my first set on Aquabid, and I made so much money selling cherry shrimp to stores and club members and anybody that wanted to get into them. And they were pretty profitable, like 10 bucks a shrimp back then. But I remember having to like save for my job and go, okay, I gotta buy. It was like 80 bucks, and at the time that was a lot of money. You know, now, almost 20 years later, like 80 bucks, okay, guy, right? But at the time, for me, $80 was, you know, after taxes and all that, was more than a whole day's worth of work, and, you know, rent and all of that. There wasn't a lot of money left over, so it took saving, right? Because I also needed the aquarium and this, and I had some other aquariums, but I'd never ordered from Aquabid before, so it was like, oh, if we invest $80 and they die, and what did I do then? And or what if I get them and I just kill them, and that's $80 gone? Because I couldn't buy them at local stores. So I bought these off Aquabid, and they went into this all-in-one aquarium that I had gotten and I put a sponge on the intake so the shrimp wouldn't get sucked up. And it was actually about 9 gallons of water, and it sat right next to my monitor. Back then I was a one monitor dude because, you know, like I didn't own laptops or anything, and it was just like I was a gamer nerd. One monitor apparently was good enough for me, and then my aquarium, my little aquarium. And I had, you know, to the right of that was a 100-gallon African cichlid tank, right? And I had a couple other tanks. But that cherry shrimp tank really captured me in the hobby, I think, because anytime in a game you're waiting for it to start or something, I'd be watching it. Or anytime I was writing an email, you would just see this little red thing move, and green plants, obviously, so they stood out. And it would just be like, oh, what are they doing? And then I remember the first time we got babies, because I was waiting on that, right? Like, that's the cash cow. We're going to get babies out of these things. And I remember that I didn't think I was getting any babies, but I didn't know what to expect. And then one day I saw a baby, and then it was like, I've missed all of these babies. Like, they are tiny and hidden and clear. It was amazing. And what I loved about it was constantly changing. There was always more. There was every generation, and it couldn't have been easier. I didn't have to change the water. The plants just grew. Algae, with or without it, didn't matter. You just put some food in every few days, really is what I was doing. And then I would get more shrimp, and then I'd put them in more tanks, and I watched one time a bunch of Congo tetras ate them all. Like, ooh, did some learning. But back then, again, forums, and it was, I have this problem where I can't, I think it's because I became that internet expert that burned me too many times, that I now trust nothing, and I have to like walk face first into the wall to know, yeah, we try and avoid walking face first into walls. And so, but with that, I also found so many fish they were compatible with, because back then it was just shrimp went best with shrimp, just like goldfish, fancy goldfish go best with fancy goldfish. Like, well, actually, they actually do pretty good with reticulated hillstream loaches and a few other things too. And the shrimp were that way, where yes, I did put them with the Congo tetras and they got ate. Ooh, don't do that, right? But then I would try other combos, and that would start working, and eventually my whole fish room was basically populated with cherry shrimp. But at the time, they were such a precious creature and so delicate in our minds. And it turns out they're kind of like cockroaches, and I've got them growing in almost every aquarium in here, and I love that. They're little tank buddies that clean and do all that, and they're full of little antics. It's fun if you've never seen shrimp like grab a wafer and run across the tank, like a mono shrimp's doing that, or just them fluttering around or getting spooked by a fish, even though the fish isn't trying, it's just swimming by. And so I think why I think I would come back to that is you can do that in almost any size aquarium. I mean, I literally think I could do it like in a jar. If you put me in a country where I couldn't get aquariums, but somehow I could get cherry shrimp, I think I could be like, look at this, it's a milk container, and I'm keeping shrimps. And so I think everybody should experience that if you haven't. I did a video, and I'm sure it's either out by now or it's coming out, where I do name shrimp as one of my favorite things. And there's a lot of different color varieties, and I love to look at the crystal shrimps and the tiger shrimps and all these higher end shrimps. But for me, what I love about that, the shrimp hobby in general, is the side where you can it can be almost a passive hobby in that, and I've met very successful shrimp breeders and people high up in corporations where their hobby is the shrimp because they can still have a family, they can still have a demanding career and all of that. And so even though they would love to have all this other stuff, maybe they'd love to have a giant reef tank, or maybe they'd love to have this other demanding aquarium, they can't because maybe they're raising kids and work is calling and they gotta fly out for work and they gotta do this and they got a new hobby and they gotta do that. But the shrimp, they're kind of always down to clown. You come back and, hey, you're doing good, all right. Hey, you made more. Every 30 days, you're basically making more. And what I love about shrimp is once you kind of get them stable in your fish room, in your aquarium, whatever it is, they pretty much don't get diseases. They don't really take a turn for the worse outside of you did something horribly wrong to your aquarium. Yes, they can come in with some diseases and things like that, and you have to, work on that. But once they're pretty much good to go, you've gotten rid of, I can never remember all the like the vorticilla and like the green fungus on their swimmerets, and if you can get through that and get some actual clean shrimp going in your fish room, they don't really have the problem like guppies have or someone else, where when they start populating and now you're feeding more food and maybe they're getting a bacterial infection or maybe they got ick, or when you add a fish, you don't really add a chance to get those shrimp sick. So I love that part. And I love that they're making more. And then if you ever get way too many, all your friends have them, the store doesn't want any more, they're great calcium. So they're great for puffers and they're great for turtles and they're great for, I knew a guy, we'll go into story mode, we're getting a little long on this one, but I knew a guy who, this is back when I was new into shrimp, and he was a kind of a business partner of mine, and we ran a blog, and if anybody actually read this blog, I would be shocked, and you probably wouldn't even know it was me, but way back, early 2000s, it was called tankgeek.com, and this gentleman and I, we were making blog articles, and we were basically fish nerds, right? And we were hoping that we could get sponsored by like ADA and other people. Like, we just wanted free stuff to like do more. That's all we wanted to do. It wasn't to get rich, wasn't to get famous. We just wanted to do more. We had low-paying jobs and we wanted to do more. And so that's why we wrote these articles, and I could do like the SEO part of it and all that. But his next phase after that, because that did not work. It basically, we got a little bit of attention. We got some free products from ADA, and we got a little bit, but we were kind of maybe a little bit ahead of our time or just terrible. Either one, right? And so his next thing was breeding shrimp, and he just ordered up every neocardinia shrimp he could basically get his hands on. He was breeding. And he was making this shrimp business, started making some shrimp food. And this story, you're going, who isn't doing that? I got 6 neighbors doing that right now. Rewind 15 years. This was not the norm. We were pioneering the shrimp business in that it wasn't just like, yeah, they're super easy to breed, you just do it. It was unknown territory, or at least we were forging ahead on our own, and the secrets weren't out, right? So, and you may have seen some of these shirts in older videos, and there was like the Shrimp Rancher shirt. They started doing some merch and everything. And the reality was the market still wasn't ready for that many shrimp. It cost a lot of money to run that many tanks, a lot of maintenance, a lot of stuff, making money. But as most small businesses do, if you're lucky, you're basically just breaking even. You're like, I did all this work and we're not losing money yet, but we're not making money yet. And as they say in business, the first 2 years, you're struggling to make a profit. And if you can stay alive for 2 years, maybe the next years you could start making some money. It's not always just off to the races, and it's a great idea, and you get venture capital, which, it didn't exist as much back then either. Where was I going with this? But the shrimp and the partner of it, like that ended up dying out. I ended up buying all of the shirts because at the cheap, and we sold them on the website actually a long time ago. And it took a while to sell a lot of shrimp shirts, but it still was a magical time in aquatics. Back then, nano tanks were still a very new concept that most stores didn't. I mean, my store that I worked for, because I worked for a store while I was doing all this. I didn't own my own store. the concept of nano didn't exist. Nothing was smaller than like a 10-gallon tank. There wasn't nano fish. Like a lot of these things, they existed, but just no one bought them. And you would hear about them though. You would hear about, I'm looking for mosquito rasboras. We had this one guy who always come in and ask for mosquito rasboras, and I used to be like, there's nothing on the list. And you would know that whenever you ordered them back then, a mosquito rasbora could come in as the exclamation point rasbora. It could come in as the maculatus, the spotted one, or the chili red one, which was like the holy grail of like, if those ones, I saw those ones at a store, mosquito rasboras, that's what they're looking for. But they were just too hard to get, and you would get the ones you didn't want, and no one would want to buy them. And shrimp, eventually the shrimp did kind of make it in, because shrimp plus guppies and other stuff, like I honestly think shrimp were one of the gateways to the nanos actually taking off, because there was lots of fanfare for shrimp, and then it became what can go with shrimp. There wasn't so much fanfare for these tiny fish, because there was no need. Why choose a tiny fish when you can get a bigger fish that's better, right? And we didn't have a need for these small tanks. So when you ask me what would I come back to if I had to get out, what will always be around for me, is going to be shrimp. It didn't start my hobby. I had to learn my way there. I started with big monster fish. I kind of went the extreme. For a long time, I was as big as it gets and as tiny as it gets. And then I kind of backfilled in over the years with all the medium fish. And now my collection, my short list, has actually fish from all of those that I've been able to experience. But the shrimp, I think there is something special there. I still pine, if everything ended tomorrow and I didn't own Aquarium Co-op and I wasn't on YouTube and all of that, first I would take like 2 years off and just barely be in aquatics. But I think I would come back with a vengeance, and I would be in shrimp. I'd want to be a judge, I'd want to be a breeder, I'd want to travel the world, I'd want to keep them. And I'm constantly trying to incorporate some of that. I've got some blue dream ocean blue dream shrimp that are just, they're mind-blowing to me. They're so much better than like a blue jelly or a blue velvet shrimp, even though they're neo. And the fact that they're still just getting better and better and better. And I love that it could be a hobby where you could be a super nerd at it and still have all your other hobbies, your family and business obligations, where so many other things, so many other types of fish and stuff, to really become a specialist, you have to hyper focus on it and put other stuff away. And I think with the shrimp, there's gonna be someone who's gonna be like, oh, but you should do that. You can always focus more. But I think shrimp or snails, invertebrates in general, are ones that will let you actually diversify a little bit and still be very, very knowledgeable. Like Chris Lucup, who knows shrimp and crayfish and snails. And he knows a lot about African cichlids, just like Oliver Knott, and they grew up with that kind of stuff. But those became a specialist, and he still has a family, still has a career, still has all these things, and is able to weave it together and still remain relevant. So yeah, shrimp. So thanks for hanging out, and we'll answer some more questions someday. We'll see you later.